welcome everybody to a special board meeting here at the Paso Community College. My name is Jack Haggerty. I'm chair of the board. If you are at home, you can follow along at www.youtube.com/user/go/EPCC. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Can we stand up real quick and do a pledge of allegiance? Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, I want to thank everybody for being here. Can we call a vote?
Mr. Utzer. Here. Mrs. Robles. Here. Ms. Nájera.
Here.
Mr. Mendez.
Here.
Mrs. Moy.
Here.
Dr. Graham. Here. Mr. Haggard.
Here. Okay, open forum. No?
There is none, Judge.
Five.
Let me pull up the agenda. Item 5.1, discussion action items. Mr. Fernando Flores, Vice President of Finance and Administration, CFO, will provide an update on the development of the 2026-2027 fiscal year budget.
Good afternoon, Mr. Flores.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Haggerty, Vice Chair Nájera, Secretary Graham, members of the board, and Dr. Serrata. Thank you for the opportunity to present the second workshop towards developing the fiscal year 26-27 operating budget. My name is Fernando Flores. I'm the Vice President of Finance and Administration. I'm supported this afternoon by AVP Ms. Ana Zuniga and the Director of Budgets, Ms. Laura Tejas. At the June 25th budget workshop, I indicated that many of the estimates that presentation included were very preliminary. To a large extent, our revenue and expenditure estimates prepared today are a lot closer to final. Also at that presentation, I said that for this coming year, there are several noteworthy events that have impact on the upcoming budget and future budgets. Namely, 2027 is a legislative year, and the new appropriation will result in our funding for the next biennium, starting in fall of 2027. The current budget development has already been impacted by one $8 million appropriation funding decrease, and we need to be wary of potential future state funding surprises. With new House Bill 8 performance tier funding model, the colleges operate under the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board has the opportunity to annually change the reimbursement rates for performance measures. For fiscal year 27, 3 weights and other factors were lowered 20%, resulting in a decrease of overall $3 million of the $8 million prorated reduction that was passed on to the college this year. The new reality is that each year the Coordinating Board Finance Rulemaking Committee has the potential to affect our reimbursement rates. Another trend that seems to be evolving is there appear to be fewer high school age-going students. This is referred to as the enrollment cliff. This forecast is partially supported by the fact that El Paso has either experienced a decrease in population or there has been little to no enrollment or population growth. Some of the actions we have taken to offset risk and variability in our revenues supporting the operating budget are: we have utilized our contracted investment management firm of Hilltop Securities to invest part of our core fund balance in safe, long-term assets that will produce guaranteed interest income over several years, offsetting market risk and bolstering the operating budget interest income revenues, all in compliance with our investment policy. Our Student Success Endowment Fund is also benefiting from investing long-term, and the resulting interest income is providing students scholarships, which will help support enrollment for future years to come. Our projections for two of the three large revenue streams, property tax revenue and tuition and fees, employs the principle of conservatism. Our projection for property tax revenue considers the possibility of more refunds, and therefore we have adjusted our property tax revenue estimate accordingly. Our tuition and fees revenue stream continues to consider other changing mix in students, and therefore we have adjusted our exemptions higher to reflect this trend. While these adjustments resulted in lower revenue projections, these adjustments help to create a more sustainable budget. Different from other years, no additional funding requests from the executive areas have been added to the proposed budget. After the President has reviewed and adjusted their requests, executive areas were instructed to fund their request from within their existing budgets. As it was last year, our main goal continues to be to build a sustainable budget for the coming year. Now we move to the main elements of today's presentation. So we provided a budget workshop on June the 25th, the board. And so today we're going to look at the baseline budget updated as of June 30th, 2026. So that is the compilation of all the executive area submission of budgets that occurred back in March, and then the budget office came back and produced the baseline budget, which is going to be the basis for next year's operating budget. Then we updated revenue for fiscal years 2025-26, the current year, and then we used those updated projections to inform us about revenues for 26-27. Then we'll look at revised funding strategies based on updated revenue projections. So here we'll look at the impact of the $8 million cut, and then we'll look at different ways to strategize how to overcome that. Then we'll look at next steps for adoption of the fiscal year 26-27 budget. So this is a look at revenue projections for the current operating year, 25-26. Where are we now? And so these are based upon actual revenues through June 30th. As a reminder, our fiscal year is September the 1st through August the 31st of every year. So if you look at the focus on the middle column, on projected revenues for 25-26, you see the appropriations are pretty much coming in as budgeted, a small decrease of $158,000. Overhead recovery, a very small decrease as well. Then we look at tuition and fees are projected to come in at $38.2 million, a decrease of $673,657. Here's where that mix of students is having an impact on our tuition and fees. And so then we look at property tax revenues. Those came in $1.1 million higher than budgeted. That's a result of the fact that we budget based upon the CAD's certified valuations, which are 2.8% discounted. And that's what taxing entities asked for, more conservative valuations. And then when the levies are sent out, they're sent out without a discount. As a result, we receive more property tax revenue than what we budgeted. So we came in 1.1 million higher. And then other income, we're 3.5 million higher, a result of the interest rate environment. So we budget other income very conservatively. We budget interest at $5 million because interest income is not a sustainable revenue stream.
So where did the $3 million come from?
The $3 million came because of higher interest income. So we budgeted $5 million and we brought in $8 million. Because when we budget, interest income is not a sustainable revenue source because we don't know what's going to happen during the year with rates. So we budget very conservatively. And Right now, the Fed has chosen to leave rates between a range of 3.5% to 3.75. So rates are pretty high still right now. But we're gonna budget conservatively going forward because we don't know what happens in a month or 2 weeks or a day with rates. So we continue down. Other income, as I said, has a positive variance of 3.5 million, 56.97% higher than the adopted budget in column 1. And then we continue down. Self-supporting will bring in $1.4 million. So all told, the projected revenue estimate for the current operating year is $176,244,970 when compared to the adopted budget revenues of $173,931,632. There's a positive overall variance in projected revenues of $2.3 million. We're higher than the budget in revenues by 1.33%.
Did we get the figure back from the CAD and how much money we're gonna bring in from the taxes?
Yes, sir. On July 24th, we received the certified valuations, and as a result of that, we computed a no new revenue tax rate and calculated and projected our property tax revenue. And we'll cover that on the 26-27 look at projected revenues. So the revenue number of $176.2 million, you're going to see that on the next slide here. Because here is where we bring together projected revenues, and then we estimate expenditures for the current operating year, and we see how we're doing. So on this particular slide, the purpose of the slide is to show us what we're going to add to fund balance at the end of the year. And so this is also a very important slide because this shows how the college is currently performing financially. It combines projected revenues, which we just covered on the previous slide, with the projected expenditures resulting in an estimated increase or decrease in fund balance. So when you look at the fiscal year 25-26, overall, what do the results look like? In the middle column, when you compare total revenues to the projected expenditures of $158,062,522, there's a resulting surplus of $18,182,448. These are very positive results for the current year. So before we close the year every year, we meet with Dr. Serrata and we determine the amount to add to fund balance and to capital projects. That's a discussion we have every year before we close the accounting year. So fund balance is very important because it can be used for emergency purposes should we need it, and it's important to SACS COC accreditation, and also it's important to rating agencies when they look at us. So we currently employ 2 rating agencies. We employ Fitch Rating and Standard & Poor's Global rating agencies. And with Fitch, we currently have a AA rating. And with Standard & Poor's, we have a AA+ rating. That's the highest rating in El Paso, according to our financial advisor. So relatedly, we benefited this year from our refunding bond sale this past March, partially because of these high ratings that we have. Another factor rating agencies look at is a pattern of maintaining strong controls over the operating budget and having a history of surpluses as we did and demonstrated to them. Part of what contributes to the college's overall financial resiliency is our practice of maintaining our strong fund balance ratios as we have done. The surplus balance is created by vacancies and variable costs that do not occur and coupled with exceeding revenue budgets. So now we look ahead at planning for the fiscal year 26-27 budget development. So we look at the revenue streams here. So appropriation is based upon the June 26th release from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board of the 27 funding runs and the new funding model. So we were notified, so Texas community colleges were funded at $1.1 billion, or a reduction from fiscal year 26 appropriations. For us, that resulted in an appropriation of $35,979,352, or a decrease of $8 million to us from when comparing FY26 to FY27. So this resulted from coordinating board rule changes and a prorated funding reduction from the state. Can you go to slide 22, I think. Is it 22, Beth? Oh, it is 22, isn't it? So this shows the rule changes that occurred affecting our appropriation for 2027. Dr. Serrata, the weights changed?
Yes, we've been working with the coordinating board collaboratively, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and so we were privy to the weight changes and to the recommendations of the weight changes. I'll share that at one point, as we were negotiating back and forth, the commissioner said, well, you know, why should a student continue to receive the economically disadvantaged weight? And I explained, well, when a student receives a level 1 certificate, we don't take away their Pell Grant. They continue with the Pell Grant until they receive a baccalaureate degree. So these were some of the changes. All of it is in an effort to reduce the cost of the new funding mechanism. And so we went from 25%. Remember that a student that earns any of the metrics, whether it be the 15 hours of dual credit, whether it be a level 1 certificate, a credential of value, successfully transfer, these are applied based on that. So student gets the level 1 certificate, the college receives the reward for the level 1 certificate. In addition, there's a 25% bump if the student was academically disadvantaged or developmental, if they ended up in remediation coursework. We get a bump of economically disadvantaged if the student is in high school, if they're on free or reduced lunch, if they're on Pell when they come to the college, they receive that. And then the adult learner is any student that's 25 or older when they receive the credential. So we worked with the coordinating board and we reduced these levels. We had estimated that this would cost us between this and the last bullet on the slide, limiting the number of credentials that any institution can award in a 5-year period to 6 for an institution like ours, 7 if you award baccalaureate degrees. So the estimation is that those would cost the college about $2.8 million. They ended up costing the college right at $3 million. So we anticipated a funding cut from the state approximately $3 million. What we didn't anticipate was the proration. And the proration was applied because the coordinating board only had so many dollars that were appropriated to them. They cannot issue resources they don't have. That cost the college just under $5 million additional dollars.
Thank you, Dr. Sedata.
Sure.
So that was giving you a picture of appropriations and how they're affected by the rule changes related to the coordinating board possibly changing them every year. So then we're still going to wait for final numbers on the appropriation. The 35.9 million was termed near final numbers. Last year we received the final numbers in October. But for budget planning, we have to use a number, and this is the best number that we have. So we're still waiting for numbers from the coordinating board, which we might get in October. And then we know it's a legislative year, so we need to keep that in mind to see what, how the colleges are going to come out of that. Next, on tuition and fees. So the tuition and fees are based on the tuition rate schedule in effect in fall of 2026 and current year enrollment. So when we predict forward, we're going to use the current enrollment numbers for next year. That's a very conservative way to build our budget. And so, as a reminder, the governor has frozen our ability to increase tuition and fees. Yes, sir.
Is there any timing on that? Is it just fund right now, funding until I tell you to stop, or is it a deadline? How long will that funding be, freeze be in effect? Or do we know?
Through 27, Mr. Uxer. So the governor implemented this back in the 23 session with universities. The deal between the governor and the university systems was we will not raise tuition, but the state will provide us additional resources. That went through in 23, they maintained it in 25. One of my colleagues in the state determined that it was in their best interest to reach out to the governor's office. I've long told my colleagues, don't ask the question you don't want the answer to. And the governor said it applies to all institutions of higher ed. And so our tuition has remained stable since 2020. This board raised tuition in the spring of, in February of 2020. We do it in the spring because we start enrollment in March. So the board chose to raise tuition in February of 2020, not anticipating a pandemic the following month. And we've maintained tuition at that level since. So we will have 7 years that we will not have raised tuition. Our hope is that the governor will allow us to raise tuition, but that won't occur until at the soonest the fall of 27. For the college, it wouldn't occur until the spring of 28 because enrollment will have already begun by the time we get that response.
I got a legal question, Counselor. Where is it written in the statute that the governor sets tuition?
There's nothing to that point. I mean, it's a legislative issue.
I don't get it.
Local control. And we're asking, Judge, we're asking the legislature, and we're, as we present to our delegation, we're asking them to reinstate local control.
I thought we had it. Where is it? Where did they take it out of the statute, Council?
They have not.
I haven't seen it yet.
Do we have any other attorneys in here? I don't get it. How do they get to cut? How can they tell us what to do?
It's all supposed to be under local control, and that's my understanding of the statute. So, I mean, I haven't seen any authority, Chair Haggerty, to enable the governor or anybody outside, you know, our local board to be able to institute.
Well, they're asking us to set a blanket.
Right.
They've screwed us out of $8 million over the last 2 years. When did we get our money? In January?
So we received an appropriation based on what's available to the coordinating board, so that we will receive a payment in
50%. We received 50% in October, and then in the following February, the other 25%, and then in June
25% of what?
of the appropriation that's appropriated to us in this.
of the 35.9 million.
Right.
I mean, how can we budget when they don't give us the money they said they're gonna give us?
So a
And
couple
then they turn around and tie your hands and say, oh, you can't raise tuition, can't raise taxes.
So a couple of things, Judge. Along the same parameters, the coordinating board has created 2 work groups for community college finance. One work group is the outcomes changes work group. I will chair that work group. We're working with a couple of other college presidents, as well as some institutional researchers and a vice president of instruction. There will be a structural changes work group. Chancellor Hellier from San Jacinto will chair that group, again with some finance officers, additional presidents. They will be looking at specifically guardrails on year-over-year funding increases or decreases to try and smooth this out for House Bill 8. in addition to some other areas. I will be looking at reviewing credentials that are using the same credit hours and in determining how many of those same credit hours can be utilized for additional credentials, as well as transfer and associate degree outcomes within a semester credit hour range. So again, we're working very closely with the coordinating board to try and overcome some of the hiccups that we've seen with House Bill 8. First and foremost, the system is working. It is an outcomes-based system. Had the resources been there, we would be in a very different situation. So the first thing is all of us are asking for in the coordinating board is supporting a supplemental appropriation. So that would go in before the budget is set. So in January and February timeframe of 27, the legislature would hear our supplemental appropriation request and either vote it up or down, and then it would be paid in July. But that supplemental would be next year's budget paying for this year's accounting.
So let's say they voted down, whatever.
We have to make do. But that'll also be why we're asking we're letting our delegation know, and the community colleges will let all of the legislators know that we prefer to have authority to raise our tuition as we see fit, as this board sees fit.
I don't know where we ever lost it. Did they complain when we raised it from 972 to 1,032? So why are they complaining now?
Affordability.
I don't get it.
So for you all that are visual, this slide shows really well how the college has maintained the tuition rate flat for many years.
I remind the board that back in 16 is when the board chose to implement a 2-year tuition, a standard 2-year tuition, so that students would know coming into the institution, the tuition will not change for the next 2 years. You have an opportunity to earn your credential within that time frame and know that tuition and fees will remain constant. We did that in 16 through 18, we did that in 18 through 20, and then we raised tuition as the expectation was in 20, which was the second year, and then we anticipated theoretically that we would be looking at it in 22, in 24, and this current year as well.
So it's,
What stopped us in the past, we didn't have a need to raise tuition. We were in a good financial position between the HERF resources that we were seeing in 21 and 22. We didn't see a need in 23. We didn't see a need to raise tuition either. I would remind the board, we didn't raise taxes in any of these years either.
I understand that, but I don't know why. Here's my problem. You're asking us to budget our budget, and then we come back for budget the next year, and oh, by the way, they're not gonna give us what they said they were gonna give us. How can we run an operation if we don't know what we're gonna, and all these good people we are expecting to raise?
I think that's fair, Judge. And I think this is
And
part
the
of
problem I have is everywhere I read is everybody's getting laid off because they don't have any money. I don't wanna be sitting here next year having to say, okay, look to your left, look to your right, which one do you wanna go? Because the state decided not to pay us our money. I don't wanna be putting that, because right now, everybody has a job. But I don't wanna be sitting here next year saying, look to your left, look to your right, pat your partner on the back, and off they go. And this is not how we run and operate. How can we operate without being able to raise our tuition? It's crazy. No, I don't know. That's where I stand on this issue.
So the next revenue stream, we're going to talk about our property taxes. And we received the certified valuations on July 24th. And the projection that we have for revenue for property tax is now based on the certified taxable property valuation of $76.1 billion. That's the valuation in El Paso, which includes which includes new property of $1.5 billion. Incidentally, the growth from last year to this year has slowed down dramatically. We only increased by about $2.6 billion in the tax assessed valuation. The previous 4 years, we were increasing by close to $5 to $7 billion, which was driving our no new revenue rate down. So this is a change that has occurred. And so it resulted in a no new revenue tax rate of 10.2025 cents per $100 valuation. We are currently at 10.3563 per $100 valuation, a slight decrease, about 1.5% decrease, but a decrease nevertheless. So can we go to 41? So here, Dr. Serrata was talking about the tax rate. And so this slide shows the history of tax increases along this row right here. You can see that the last one was in 1718, so about 9 years ago would have been the last time we did a tax increase. But you see how our rate kind of peaked out in 1718, like 14.16 cents per $100 valuation. And so from then to now, it has declined because there have not been any tax increases and the valuations have gone up. So this is kind of a look at what kind of stewards the college has been in terms of its ability to raise taxes. Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, when will Meta kick in?
So Meta is already kicking it. So the way that the Central Appraisal District does that, as soon as there's been improvement to the property that's measurable, they go out and estimate the cost of that improvement and bring it onto the tax rolls. So over the period of construction, it's going to be added to the tax assessed valuation.
So by moving dirt, we get more tax.
Yes, sir. It's very expensive.
That's all right.
Yep. So additional funding needs that will need to be strategized to cover. Funding priority for increasing overhead budgets. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We term that must be funded on the slide a little bit further down. Those are necessary things to maintain operations for the district, things that we absolutely need. And then consideration of a salary enhancement for employees. So then now let's look ahead at projected revenues for the coming year for 26-27 based upon the now certified property tax valuation that we have, and also the cut from the state of $8 million. So what are revenues going to look like next year? So if you focus on the middle column for fiscal year 26-27 on projected revenue, you see that appropriation when compared to the adopted current budget has a decrease of $7.2 million in it, a decrease of a little bit more than 14.5%. So we talked about the cut being $8 million, and this is not $8 million, right? Because part of the appropriation is the fast funding that we get. So we have a gain of $712,000 in that appropriation. When you net the two, it's a decrease of $7.2 million. And so overhead recovery is budgeted based upon the 25-26 actual. So we continue that next year saying we're only going to bring in $642,000, so a very small decrease. Moving to tuition and fees, we forecast tuition and fee revenue coming in at $37.7 million. When compared to the 25-26 adopted budget of 38.9, that's a decrease of $1.1 million. So I talked about the shift in students, and so this is a continuation of that shift. So when Ms. Zuniga projected those numbers out for next year, we forecast an increase continuing for that shift, and so we estimate very conservatively $37.7 million in tuition and fees, factoring in that continuing change in mix of students. So then property tax revenue, here Mr. Haggerty is where we looked at the new valuation of 2025 no new revenue rate, and project out that our property tax revenue will grow by $961,000. That is attributable to new property mainly, but also different from other, well, not different from other years, but we increased the amount related to refunds. We see that there's a larger instance of refunds that's occurring, so we boosted our projected refund amount by $400,000. Last year we budgeted a decrease of $1.6 million for refunds. We see that climbing. We increased that refund to $2 million, resulting in a lower property tax revenue amount. So that 961 is a result of new property, the tax on new property decreased by increasing the consideration for refunds. Then we have other income. We talked about
It's the government.
we talked about the interest rate environment. The interest rate environment right now is looking better, actually.
Interest rate.
The interest rate environment is looking better. The Fed maintained rates in a range of 3.5 to 3.75, and the rates have reacted here recently. You see higher interest rate income rates out there. But we don't know how long that's going to last, and that we said we're going to budget conservatively for other income. So a small increase of $100,000 there. And so as we go down the middle column, we just budget for $3 million for self-supporting. And so the projected revenues for 26-27 are $166,470,000. That, when compared to the adopted budget of $173,931,632, is a decrease of close to $7.5 million. That is a decrease of 4.29%. So when we look at those revenue projections, here's how they break out. Property taxes is the biggest component at $76.2 million, or 45.79% of the budget, followed by state appropriation at $42.4 million, or 25.5% of the budget, followed by tuition and fees, $37.7, or 22.68% of the budget. These are our three largest revenue streams supporting the budget, those three right there. And so other income, 6.3, self-supporting of 3, and then overhead recovery there. All of that is what comprises the projected revenues of $166.4 million.
Is the other income grants and all that kind of stuff?
No, the other income is, the overhead recovery is where the grants are. It's grants provide overhead recovery. That's indirect cost we recoup from grants.
So that's up there in the upper right.
So, yes, sir, perfect, that's the overhead recovery. Other things in there are nursing fees, testing fees that we have in addition to interest income. So we have other small fees that we collect.
So what we can do, instead of raising all the stuff the state says we can't, we can just raise all our fees.
Well, I think it's inclusive of fees, you cannot raise.
It's tuition and fees charged.
We're gonna start looking for a chair, looking for a bus, looking for a desk. I just don't know how we can budget when we don't know how much money they're gonna give us.
So we have to be very careful. We have to be very
Yeah.
careful and take the necessary steps as required by the challenge of the day.
Yeah, that's what gets me, is everything's required by them, but we can't do anything for us. It doesn't make any sense, I still can't get this in my mind. Who are they to tell us what we can charge for tuition? I don't get it. They didn't complain back in the days when we raised our tuition. But now we're stuck at now raising tuition. For 7 years? I think everybody in here knows what inflation is. I know we've got inflation I know one year we had a 9% inflation over the last 7 years. And we can't raise tuition.
It makes no sense. I mean, the legislative imposition on tuition, if you look at chapter 54 of the Texas Education Code, they could set the minimum for tuition. But when you look at, and I think it's chapter 130, I think it's like section 131 or 130.084 of the Texas Education Code, it says that the local governing board is the one that has the right to impose tuition rates. So that's why earlier, I don't know of any other statute, Judge.
So why don't we raise it to see what they do?
Can we file a lawsuit?
You could, but I mean, it's, you know, to me, I think it's better, you know, to get strength in numbers. And if legislatively, you're able to resolve those issues without having to file a lawsuit, if you're gonna sue the state, you're gonna have to sue them in Austin.
I don't think we need to sue them. I think we should just raise our tuition and they can come sue us.
It won't sue us, Judge, that piece of the budget right there, that state appropriations.
Exactly.
That's what they'll lose, that's what they'll lose.
But they like to expect it, when we first started this whole thing back in 1969, they said they're gonna pay 80% of the cost. And they're down to 20, what did it say, 25.35? Liar, liar, I'm fired. I don't get it, they have all the control.
That really is the.
And how can we budget when we don't know what we're gonna get?
So in fairness, I mean, we are working on it, that's part of the structural piece that I explained, that we're working with the coordinating board to try and work these issues out so that institutions, and in fairness, I told the commissioner, I didn't say, wait, you're giving us too much money. But when they're cutting, I'm like, wait a minute, you're cutting too much. So we're looking at developing some structural changes where the fluctuation would be as significant.
But you mentioned that things are working, but they really are not. Every time they say, if you do this, you're gonna get this amount. I mean, the staff delivered on the outcomes.
I agree.
And prior to that, we had another offer that if you do this, you're gonna get this, and we never got it. So, I mean, at some point, somebody's gotta take a stand and put a stop to it, even if it's, you know, little EPCC, but at least they know that you're gonna rattle their cages a little bit.
I think
We'll
that's.
run point on that, we'll run point
I
for
think
us.
it's fair, Dr. Graham. I think, you know, what the state would say and what the coordinating board and what leadership of the state would say is if you look at our funding in prior to 2023, we were well below $35 million. I believe we're at $31 million. We went all the way up to $48 million of state appropriations, so almost a 50% increase in a 3-year period. So they're gonna say, well, you weren't complaining when you were getting that, which is true. And so we're looking at developing, the reason I say that it's working is colleges are now funded on an outcomes-based model, and all of the colleges are producing more for
But
their
we're not getting
communities.
the funding they want.
Agreed, Dr.
So,
Graham.
you know, I mean, that came from them, not from us.
True, and I think that there's gonna be a concerted effort to fix that. I was just at, on Tuesday of last week, I was in Austin for the Senate Higher Education Committee meeting. There was lots of promise and lots of good things said by the dais of senators in support of House Bill 8 in saying that they're gonna get through this, they're gonna add resources that they need to. We don't know what the supplemental request will be from the coordinating board. The coordinating board is who submits that supplemental request. Now, what I can tell you is that the 50 colleges up to this point have produced 441 million additional dollars of revenue that the state owes us now, based on our outcomes. So I don't know what the coordinating board's request for a supplemental appropriation would be. In the 25 session, we asked for $89.5 million, and they approved that. The college's portion was 4.7 million. And so our hope is that they'll approve a supplemental. I just don't know what amount that will be.
Either do they.
Yeah.
So these are the projected revenues that we've estimated to support next year's operating budget. So next, this is the baseline budget, and this, if you look at the middle column, these are all the executive level budget submissions that happened back in March. And if you look at the middle column by executive area, those are the projected baseline budgets for them. If you continue down the middle column at the very bottom, you see that the baseline budget totals at $172,695,000. When compared to the current adopted budget, that's a decrease of $1.2 million. So then this is going to become the budget for next year. So when we look at that baseline budget, it is broken down by functional area here. And we see that instruction is the largest at $55.9 million, 32.38% of the budget, followed by institutional support, 53.4 million, or almost 31% of the budget. Academic support, 21 million, or 12.15% of the budget, followed by student services, operation and maintenance, transfers, public service, self-supporting, and research. So the takeaway, one of the takeaways from this particular slide is that when you add up instruction at 32.38%, academic support at 12.15%, and student services, that comprises almost 52.5% of the budget, all dedicated to students. So that's the way it should be, all the majority of the effort towards supporting students.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a book that colleges have that tells you if their properties are a certain age or whatever, how much money you should have for maintenance? So in other words, I know most of our properties are all 50 years old, and they need roofs, and they need, now EPIS, he is coming and asking us for $400 million for air conditioning. I mean, are we putting, is 13% or 7.8% enough to make sure that we're maintaining our property? We keep adding square footage.
Yes, sir.
How much has that been over? Give me, 2 years ago, what was our maintenance budget? Was it 7.8%?
So this particular budget here for maintenance does not address deferred maintenance, which you're getting at the roads, the mechanical systems.
It doesn't have anything to do with maintenance?
It does. It's maintaining all the facilities. It's keeping everything going.
So my question is, 2 years ago, what was our percentage of our budget for maintenance?
Probably about pretty close to the same thing.
Do you think it was pretty good?
I do.
Was it adequate enough to cover all our problems?
It's adequate to keep things going.
But it's, if you're asking a question, can the systems be upgraded, can the facilities be upgraded? That's not the budget that's gonna do it, it doesn't have that.
So typically, organizations that cannot set aside enough money for deferred maintenance, the ones that can't set aside enough money will do many times a GO bond and put it on the taxpayer. They'll do like EPISD is proposing to do a tax back.
Yeah, I think that's great, but I don't think EPASC is gonna get 400 million. I don't think after they just lost 52 million.
Right.
And turn around and ask for 400 million, I think people are gonna say, what? I mean, I'm protected because I'm over 65 and my school taxes are frozen, thank God. But my biggest problem is we built all this stuff, we gotta maintain it.
Right. So for us, the college, what the college has done really well, every year we make budget presentations to you, and we project what the surplus is gonna be.
Okay.
And we were talking about this as being the slide to what we're gonna add to fund balance. But when I was explaining that, before we close every year, we meet with Dr. Serrata, how much we're gonna put into fund balance and capital projects. Here is where the surplus helps us with capital projects. So we look at maintaining our fund balance ratio to operating budget. Once we hit that target number, then Dr. Serrata says, okay, let's use this for roofs, buildings, mechanical
Hey, you
systems.
guys have done a great job. I just want to make sure, is there anybody that's in the education field that's bored enough to come up with a formula for this is how much money you need in your account for a building 25 years old, 50 years old?
The typical approach to addressing that huge issue is to do a building assessment by an outside company. And so they will come in and they will have engineers that will look at the age of your facilities, and then they will make an estimate of what it takes to bring those buildings up to date. So we had that done back in 2012 or 2011, a building assessment, and then the entity will look at how to fund that. Typically, they'll look at a GO bond to fund that huge number.
You're a passive one.
We didn't.
1974.
So what did we do in 2011 when we got the results from that? Did we put it on the shelf and forget about it, or what did we do with the assessment?
So, probably, I wasn't in this position back then, but I
You
would
were
say
here in 2011?
I wasn't in this
He was the
position.
vice president.
I was in this position.
I thought I saw your face here.
I was
You've been here
probably
long.
sitting,
You've been here a long time.
I was probably sitting back here or in another.
I mean, we do all these assessments and stuff, do we follow them when they give them back to us, or do we just put it on?
Well, then the discussion has to be, how do you fund that? And then you look at the timing on
And
when.
that's my question, are we funding enough to take care of our buildings? That's my question.
Yes.
The past 2 or 3 years, we've been funding that.
Okay, well, that's all I just,
Isn't that supposed to be part of the O&M fiscal plan in that number?
So what we budget, this is an annual budget, what we budget in O&M annually is enough to maintain the institution, not to deal with deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is a separate entity.
Deferred maintenance, not the O&M.
That's maintaining the buildings currently. Deferred maintenance, we're funding currently as we have more revenue than expenses in any given year, and that's how we're funding deferred maintenance. And VP Flores is correct, over the last few years, we've invested dramatically into deferred maintenance.
But you don't see deferred maintenance in this pie chart. Oops.
Do you think there's some need to go on our start here, or are we okay?
No, I think we're fine. I think we've got plenty of projects right now. We have the resources to fund those respective projects right now for the next 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll continue to take it seriously and continue to move forward with those. At this point in time, the issue is capacity, finding contractors that are willing to come in and work on these particular projects, the timing involved. We have the elevators projects at the Valle Verde campus. that started as a $2 million project is now approximately $6 million as we continue to move forward. And those are, we heard Dr. Burnham was kind enough to let us know about the elevators at a board meeting, and so we've taken it seriously and we're moving forward in repairing those. They just take time and they take a lot of resources.
I think you guys do a great job. I don't know how you do it when you don't even know how much money they're gonna get. I think you do wonders. It's phenomenal how you get this all done and you don't know how much money's coming in.
So we've looked at the baseline budget, and then we looked at how it's distributed. Majority of the baseline budget's going to instruction, and at 55.9 million, institution support, we went around this chart and looked at how the pie is broken up. And so when we looked at this, we also said that instruction, academic support, and student services represent over 52% of the budget, so the effort is going towards students. That's the takeaway from this budget. So then we look at it by expense category. So how are we spending? So faculty salaries, 57.7 million, 33.4% of the budget. And in that rectangle box there, you see the distribution between full-time and part-time faculty, what we have budgeted. And then you look at staff salaries, 52 million, 30% of the budget, and same distribution between full-time and part-time and overtime. And then supplies and services, we have allocated $29.6 million for that, 17%. Benefits, we set aside $15.6 million for benefits. Transfers, 7.5, contingency 7.3, travel 1.4, and equipment 1.1. The takeaway, one of the takeaways from this slide is what we spent on faculty, staff, and benefits. When you add up those three categories, we spent 72.6% of the budget. Yeah. So that's the allocation, and that's where the majority of the budget goes to. So then we look at additional funding requests. These are the must-be funded items that we talked about earlier on other funding priorities. And so we're asking for 1.3 million for items to address things. We have no choice, but, well, we always have a choice, but these are necessary to continue operations. The Central Appraisal District passes a budget every year. That's our pro rata part of their increase. They pass that along to all the taxing entities. So they passed along additional cost of $68.8 thousand per year to us.
What is timekeeping system?
So timekeeping system is an automated way of people clocking in and clocking out. Right now we rely on paper for all of that. So this is the annual estimated cost of that budget for software and equipment.
And then the ADA, is that for the disability?
So the ADA, so we've experienced increasing costs for interpreters.
For interpreter?
Yes, sir. So we provide interpreters in classes or whenever somebody requests that. That's the additional cost we need to keep that budget balanced.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on this list? So next we get to the slide that puts everything together. The strategies. This particular slide considers the projected revenues, the baseline budget, takes into account the $8 million decrease, and then considers columns for a 1%, 2, 3, 4, 5 salary increase, and then considers a 6% property tax increase. So let's go down the salary increase column for 1% to see how this slide is moving forward. So we talked earlier about our projected revenues of $166.4 million. And then the value of a 6% tax increase is $4.6 million. That would result in new projected revenues to support the budget of $171.1 million. That's the number we have to work with. Then you saw the baseline budget, all the executive area submissions for the budget. That's $172.7 million. And I am in the 1% column. So the value of a 1% salary increase is $1,060,000. And then if we give a salary enhancement of 1%, we increase the entry tables to stay competitive. So that's a small value of $16,000. We have not worked up the value of increasing vacant positions. We're still vacant positions that we're recruiting for. There's going to be a dollar impact for that. We're still working on that number.
Are these the ones that have been vacant for 5 years?
Well, we address those down below.
Yeah, but there was a yes or no answer.
I
It does not. Does not include
It's
this.
not.
Because we use those to balance the budget further down.
No, it's you're stashing it, and what it is a petty cash that for you to play with, be honest about it. Right?
Well, we try to recruit those positions.
Oh, yeah.
We do.
But do we need it? I mean, because some of them have been vacant for a long time, so why don't we even have?
That's a great question. Each executive, each vice president is driving whether we recruit or not for those positions. Dr. Serrata, I will tell you, is always encouraging staff to fill vacant positions that are needed, highly needed.
And he brought up a board retreat.
He is,
When we had our board retreat, he was telling us that, he's telling his VPs to
recruit.
get off the pot. But
Not exactly in those terms.
So he is very encouraging. If you need positions, recruit them. So,
Well, with common sense, if they've been vacant for a year, you really don't need them. Otherwise, you would have filled the position.
I mean, that's how I look at it as a trustee. You can't fill it in a year. You didn't, somebody did that job anyway.
Now, if it's that you can't fill them because the salary is so incredibly low that nobody's applying, then that's a different issue that we need to look at.
Yeah, and
it
so
is, but our policy allows for negotiation. If it's a key position and we need to recruit somebody, there is allowance within our policy.
But you also have a cap.
correct.
Like if you're expecting to earn 100,000 and they offer you 50, you might be able to go to 60, but you're not gonna hit the 100,000.
Certainly are a lot of challenges with that.
I mean, it's just, is the college operating functionally in a deficit? I mean, are we restricting some operation because we don't have the people to do the job? Are there some jobs not being done because we don't have the people?
No. I
Oh,
don't
then
think
we don't,
that's-
we don't.
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say that you have some individuals that are working and exerting more time and effort because there are certain positions that are very difficult to recruit. I asked Mrs. Moy, who runs this for the district, IT operations are incredibly difficult to recruit and the job gets done, but it doesn't mean that we don't need those positions. So I think that there are certain positions within the institution that we do need, and we've adjusted salaries, and we will continue to look at these respective positions. But what we've done, and what VP Flores is indicating, is we're freezing any position that is over 2 years old that we've not been able to recruit. And that is providing us almost $2 million to help balance this budget.
So as we continue down the first 1% column, we've seen where projected revenues are 171 million, and then we looked at the baseline that's been rolling forward, 172.7 million. And so the value in that first column of the salary enhancement is 1,060,000, and then small adjustment in the tables. And then we talked a little bit earlier about the must be funded, right? We just went over that, 1,350,000, resulting in a preliminary budget of 175,122,000. That projects a preliminary budget deficit of 3,994,000 when comparing total preliminary budget to projected revenues. That's how you get the 3,994,000. So strategies within the college to fund, to address the shortfall that we have there. So to your point on vacancies, we would freeze any positions that have been vacant for 2 years and older and not under current recruitment. That has a value of 1,922,000. We would decrease the budget by that amount. Then we would also go further into our budget and we would decrease our biennium reserve by $2 million.
So you're taking the money for the budget.
We're decreasing the budget.
You're taking it out of our reserve.
Yes, sir.
And what's the balance in our reserve?
Our reserve has 6.6 million in it.
And you're taking 2 million of it.
We're taking 2 million, yes.
Going for,
Out of our biennium reserve, not our fund balance. We're not touching fund balance. Biennium reserve. So we need a small amount to balance that deficit, and we have the capacity to go a little bit further into our budget. So we came up with this strategy to address the $3.9 million preliminary budget shortfall, resulting in a balanced budget of $171,128,000 in balance with our projected revenues above.
so what happens next year when they don't give us any more money? What's our strategy then? Keep hitting our reserves?
No, I'll share with you the strategy. The strategy, number one, is that we expect an increase in state appropriations, both through a supplemental as well as through the traditional budget. And then we expect that the legislature will allow us to raise tuition as the board sees fit. So we have a strategy, Judge. By the time you pass this budget, I'm well on to next year's budget. So there will be a strategy.
Expect and what you get is two different things.
Understood. But I do expect appropriations to go up. I don't anticipate that will be at 35.9 million from the state. And I do expect that the legislature will allow us to raise tuition and cede local control back to the locals.
So that was the 1% column. On the 2% column, what changes there is the value of the salary enhancement. It goes from $1,060,000 to $2.1 million, increasing the amount of the preliminary deficit up to $5 million. And we have listed a strategy below where we would address that shortfall of $5 million. It's very similar. We would continue to freeze vacant positions, go into the biennium reserve, and then go further into our budgets to find the $1,147,000, resulting in a balanced budget.
Where are you gonna decrease?
So we have looked at where there's some balance available, and so we have balances available in the supplies category. We also have balance available in the part-time classified staff, professional support budgets, and we have capacity in the part-time faculty budgets that we have. So we have capacity to go into those budgets should we need it.
And what impact would that have on students?
One of the things we would look at is if they've had balances available for several years, then they haven't been using it. So we would look at a trend.
And if, Dr. Graham, I mean, it's a great question, if we saw enrollment surge, which we right now are, we're at about 6 or 7% ahead of last year on enrollment for the fall. But that will always be allocated. If we see we need additional faculty, we will always allocate those resources because that's the whole point of the institution is to increase, to provide the educational opportunities to our community.
But if you were to increase it, where do you take it from?
So there'll be additional revenue through tuition,
Oh,
so it would balance out.
okay.
So we've provided scenarios to go into the budget on 1% and 2%. So we call it the introduction of this presentation. We talked about the challenges, legislative sessions right around the corner. You have the rules committee that can affect our appropriation. You have the enrollment cliff. You have the change in the mix of students. So those are all potential impact to future budgets. So keeping that in mind, we didn't complete those scenarios further down. And so this is the strategy with a 6% property tax increase. This next slide shows the impact that there's an 8% property tax increase. So here what changes is the amount of revenue brought in. With an 8%, it'll bring in $6.2 million. And when you do that, it results in a smaller preliminary budget deficit in red of $2.4 million for the 1%, $3.5 million for the 2%. And so the strategies down below require less need to go into our budgets to offset the deficits, but there would still be a need to do that. So can you go to 20? So when you see the impact of a 6% tax increase on the far right-hand column, that would be an impact of $14.69 to the average home worth $239,957. So that $14.69 is approximately $1.22 per month. And then if we did an 8% increase, tax increase on the far right-hand column, it would increase the levy by $19.59 a year. So that would have an impact of $1.63 per month to the average home value of $239,000. So just wanted to show you how much that would raise. Thank you, Bill. So do you have any questions on either of these two strategy slides?
I would just reference that the 6% is an increase of approximately $1.14 a month for the average homeowner. The 8% is $1.68 a month.
But it comes back to the same thing we were talking about earlier. It doesn't matter
Taxpayers.
how much it is, that
They see it as an increase.
everything you see on TV now is affordability. I'm talking about affordability, no, I'm talking about affordability. You know, and anytime I see an increase, the magic word affordability, so
I think you're right, Mr. Exner.
we're up a tree any way you look at it.
I would tell the board so I remind, and several of you already know this, but the city, the county, the school districts are all limited to 3.5% tax increases. The 50 colleges have exerted significant energy towards convincing the legislature not to reduce our potential tax increases from 8% to 3.5% like the districts, as well as the city and county. I know that a lot of colleges, Alamo is doing an 8% tax increase in San Antonio. When I talk to my colleagues, the feeling is that this time next year, we won't be able to do an 8% tax increase, that we will be subject to something similar to the districts, the counties, and the cities.
So it's not fair.
I wouldn't say that, but I would say the likelihood is significant that there'll be some sort of tax window. Limit, correct, well said.
Mr. Flores, in your scenarios for the 8%, I don't see a decrease in area budgets. Why is that?
Because the 8% raised more property tax revenue, raised over $6 million.
And we will
requiring-
continue, we'll
require-
continue to
Would
look
that
at
still
that.
be an
Yes,
option?
yes. Yes, it could be, it could still be an option for us, should, we need
That'll
to,
give us a little more wiggle room.
correct.
So here again, here's that property tax rate history. The college has been good stewards of its ability to raise taxes.
Well, our max is 15%.
15
Our
cents.
max is
Yeah, I
15
mean,
cents, that's correct.
So in other words, we have.
Now, in
about
fairness,
4.5
that-
About 4.5%,
Correct. That's
and the 8% represents how much of that 4.5%?
8% would, our tax rate would be just over 11 cents, so there'd be about 4 cents
Oh,
capacity.
is this, so it would,
And I remind the board that while we have a 15-cent cap, you can't just go to 15 cents, we'd have to go to the voters to go to that. Again, 8%, it would take us, I guess, 8% increases to get to that almost 47, a little over 47%. Again, my anticipation is the legislature will cap that, and so then it would take 10 or 12 years of 3.5% to 4% increases. And we've been very good stewards of resources, and we've not raised taxes unless we have had to.
Or tuition.
Our tuition, correct. And again, if we had local control, we wouldn't be considering a tax increase, we would have brought a tuition increase to the board.
And my contention is we still have. You just told me that they haven't changed it.
That's what the statute says.
When we have our next board meeting, can we put that on the board agenda so we can make a vote on it? Discuss raising tuition?
It's the board's prerogative, if the board wants to include it in the agenda, we could do so.
I do, I wanna call the question and see, this is ridiculous, how can we run an operation without local control? I mean, these people over here are expecting a raise, and our hands are tied.
So next steps. So there's an item today to consideration of salary enhancement by the Board of Trustees. And then August 26th is the next meeting in August, where acceptance of the certified appraisal roll will be presented, adoption of the 26-27 budget. We need an adopted budget before September 1st, before opening up the fiscal year. And so that's on the August meeting. And then consideration to increase the no new revenue tax rate will be presented. September 1, roll the budget into banner. September 16th, should it be voted to increase the tax rate, there will be a public hearing on September 16th. And then at the September 23rd regular board meeting, the new tax rate would have to be adopted. So considering a tax rate increase, this would be the calendar that we would follow. As we mentioned, the certified rates were presented on July 24th. We have that. The budget office computed the no new revenue tax rate. End of July, the county calculated that rate as well. And Ms. Diaz verified what they calculated. The budget office requires the notice to be published. And then on August the 3rd, the board was updated with different tax scenarios today, right? And so still in this meeting, there's going to be discussion and action on a 26-27 salary increase for eligible college employees. Then the week of August the 3rd to the 7th, the no new revenue tax rate is required to be posted on the college's website after approval by the County Commissioners Court. They approve the rates for all the taxing entities. And then the Budget Office confirms that the notice has been published. August 26th, at the regular board meeting, the board will consider and deliberate on the adoption of the 26-27 operating budget. The board adopts the budget. And then the board will discuss whether to increase taxes or not. If they don't increase taxes, then we will adopt the no new revenue rate will be proposed. If taxes are going to be raised, then that will be determined at that meeting, based upon a vote of the board. So, option 1, you adopt the no new revenue rate without an increase. Option 2, then it requires a public hearing, and then we have to meet the timelines as specified by the Texas Comptroller. So we follow their rules for that. And then September 6th, we publish a notice, a public hearing on the tax increase, because we have to do that 5 days before there's a hearing. So following those rules strictly, we would publish that in the newspaper. Then September 9th, notice a public hearing on tax increase would be posted on the APCC website and TV as well. And so the Budget Office would be busy. Well, some of the Budget Office would be busy making sure that that happens. And September 16th, the board conducts a public hearing to listen to the community. September 23rd, the regular board meeting, the board adopts the tax rate after the public hearing. So that's the calendar. So next, that concludes the presentation. I want to thank the people that worked diligently, the Budget Office, Laura Diaz, Liliana Arevalo, Budget Manager, Veronica Jimenez. They've done a lot of work. These are one pie chart, but there's 663 different budgets that they're compiling, sorting, organizing into all this information, separating into supplies, overhead. It's a lot that goes on there. Ms. Ana Zuniga, I'd like to thank her for the revenue projections and a lot of other work following up on different information. And then my office, Juanita Martinez, Executive Office Manager, and Silvio De Lucio, put this together, made all the changes. Every other minute as we were changing things and never complained, always laughing, in a good mood. Want to really appreciate their late hours after 5:01 every day, working on that. Ms. Josette Shaughnessy still chimes in and looks at what we're doing and gives great insight and comments about this thing we're working on called budget development. And so Dr. Serrata as well, his input, and my cabinet colleagues for submitting their budgets and for working through the additional requests with Dr. Serrata. And the Board of Trustees, I mean, without your support and listening to what we're telling you and being thoughtful about the different strategies, we certainly appreciate everything that you all do. And then next, we'd like to say goodbye to Laura.
Oh my gosh.
Laura's retiring after over 30 years at the college. So that's her little dog, Bailey.
We have a requirement for at least 50 years.
So very appreciative of all the years in her different roles as well at the college. Certainly very grateful for everything that she has done. And we'll miss her. She retires August 31st. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Surprise.
Okay, I appreciate it. You guys want to go into executive session?
Yes.
All right, we're gonna go into executive session. So you all have to leave.
Other than
to approve a 2% salary increase for employees of the El Paso County Community College District for fiscal year 2026-2027. The board will go into executive session. Section 6, the Board of Trustees may conduct an executive or closed session pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code for one or more of the following reasons. 1, consultation with its attorney to seek or receive legal advice or consultation regarding pending or contemplating litigation or for any purpose authorized by law. 2, discussion about the value or transfer of real property. 3, discussion about a prospective gift or donation. 4, consideration of specific personnel matters. 5, discussion about security personnel or devices. Or 6, discussion of certain economic development matters. The board may also announce that it will go into executive session on any item listed on this agenda if the subject matter is permitted for a closed session by provisions of Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. Any vote regarding these items shall be taken in open session. The time is now 6:06 and the board is in executive session. 5.2, discussion and action to approve a 2% salary increase for employees of the El Paso County Community College District for fiscal year 2026-2027.
I have a motion,
Motion to approve?
Second.
any discussion? Anybody wanna talk about it? No discussion? You guys can all have some discussion.
Well, I'll start the discussion. Of course, we are very grateful for all the work that has been done. And that we are hopefully anticipating that in the future, we can do a better job with that. But depending on the finances right now, we had a big discussion and we're going to recommend the administrative recommendation.
Any other discussion? No? Okay. My personal opinion is I don't wanna be here next year making a decision, because everybody around this place is losing their jobs because of financing. The only reason I'm gonna go with this is because of our great finance people, but I don't know how they do it. How can you budget when you don't know how much money you're gonna get? It's unbelievable, but. Okay, any other discussion? Call the question.
Mr. Uxer,
Aye.
Mrs. Robles,
Aye.
Ms. Nájera,
Aye.
Mr. Mendez,
Aye.
Mrs. Moy,
Aye.
Dr. Graham,
Aye.
Mr. Harry.
Reluctantly, yeah, I just don't trust the state legislature. I don't want to be here next year telling these people that one of them has to go. So, anyway, I'm gonna vote for it. So I assume the motion passes. That's it.
Motion to adjourn? Yes.
All right, we are adjourned.
You do have some questionnaires from Dr. Holden